are you? Now look, you may well be laughing as much as I'm laughing, and I don't know, do we even need this? I feel like we do. I feel like we're at a bit of a tipping point in the universe. Don't you think, people? This is, today, the Nikon D850 versus its very, very, very close cousin, the Z7. It's a goddamn fly. Here we are in Australia. These flies, mate. Oh, it's... So what is most interesting about the Nikon D850 versus the Z7 is that they are largely exactly the same camera. There are many things that are similar about them. And the most important one, of course, because this is all about photography, isn't it? Because we love photography. And the most important thing about digital photography from an image capturing and image making perspective is the sensor. It's a beautiful thing here, the sensor. At the end of the day, they are both packing a 45.6 megapixel sensor. It's the same. But I can tell you, this one's 1 year newer, and I reckon it's just a tiny little bit 1 year better. The other difference in this sensor is we've got the focus system on the sensor. This one we don't. Otherwise, these cameras, effectively when you're shooting with them, the end user, the person that gets the photograph, is not going to know the difference. Now, what compelled me most to talk about this today is, just this week, I did a professional shoot for a university here in Melbourne. I normally shoot with my two D850s. So this is how I photographed just 2 days ago. We have two D850s and the Z7. And the beauty of a kit like this, for me as a professional, is to the client, the end result all feels the same. And using these two cameras side by side in a really high pressure shoot, it was almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit that day. We were working hard. We went through probably about 20 locations. Sadly, I can't show you any of the shots because for these commercial shoots, I sell the copyright, and sometimes they let me show you once they're published, but the client doesn't even have them yet because it was just a few days ago. And I can tell you my real world experience of what it was like to do it side by side. Let's talk about the viewfinders first. At times, using the OVF, the organic viewfinder, or the optical viewfinder was better because I felt like I could see the world the way the world really is. But then there were other times when I was in really high dynamic sunlight and shadow shots where the dynamic range was huge within the frame. What this camera allows for is for you to be able to see in the moment as you're shooting what you're actually going to capture, what is shadowed, what is overexposed. So again, there were pros and cons. I like them both. That's the viewfinder. Let's next talk about the focusing system. A lot has been said about the Z7 focus. So I would say as of right now, we have face detect and eye detect on this guy, but we have a dedicated off-sensor focusing system on the D850. So in certain conditions, this camera is better. In lower light and in high-speed situations where you have, say, or wildlife or sports situations, this will be better. But if you're wanting face detect, which I'm personally not a fan of, and I've made a video about it, which you can watch right here. Plus, I'm going to do a follow-up video because there's even more reasons that I've thought of why face detect today actually isn't what you think it is. I know that sounds weird, but face detect doesn't actually give you what you want. It doesn't know what you want. It gives you what it wants. And it might be the wrong face, for example, in the frame. Anyway, I won't dive into that right now. If you do want to use face detect or eye detect, this does it. It's a no-brainer. It keeps things simple, works well enough. Everybody's doing it now. Of course, Sony are the kings and the leaders. Yes, they are. Canon are doing it now. Nikon put their firmware update through about 6 months ago. You get that out of this. Out of the D850, you get faster focus just across the board, and you get lower light and action focus across the board. So if you were wildlife or sports, I'd still be getting this guy for sure. This thing's a cracker. And when I first got it, it's way faster than the D810 before it. And it's up there similar to a D500 in focus speed. This is quite an insane camera. It can do sports and wildlife, yet you're getting almost 50 megapixels out of that. And you can shoot with the vertical grip at 9 frames a second. So you're kind of getting the best of all worlds.
Now, another aspect, of course, is when both cameras are shooting in what I would call their native focus modes, a Z7, which is always mirror up because it's mirrorless, has almost the entire viewfinder where it can focus, as you can see here with this red box that's been cruising around. Conversely, when the D850, which we're just about to see, is in its, here it is here, native shooting mode, which is mirrored down, it can't do what we're doing right now. This is in live view, it can go all the way to the edge, but it can't do that when it's in its native mode. There is a much smaller area of focus. The Z7 wins from having more broader focus points. So if shooting on the edge of frame is something important to you, which it is to me, then the Z7 definitely wins that one.
That's focus. This one wins for focus. In low light and wildlife, across the board in normal light, they're similar. It's a similar experience. Let's next talk about ergonomics. So, it's something I've talked about a lot, and here you can see the Nikon grip. The entirety of my hand is on that grip, and there's actually still space here for, I'm not even touching the base of the camera with my hand all the way around it, whereas on my Sony, I actually can't get my hand all the way around it. And of course, as we can see, these cameras are slightly different sizes. This one is higher. But the grip happens to be almost exactly the same size. So my hand nicely wraps and fits, on both cameras. It's almost exactly the same experience. And I say kudos to Nikon for getting that right. If you go from one to the other, you kind of don't feel any difference. You don't, and that's amazing. And other things they've done with the ergonomics is the shutter button is effectively still in the same place. It's still here at the top where you expect to find it. The aperture wheel is still in the same place. Shutter and recording are still in the same place. ISO is still in much the same place. So ergonomically, these things that you use the most are all in the same place. And another thing, they've been very smart, even the playback button is in the same place. Now, there is one button that I'm frustrated about that's not in the same place, which is the menu button, which has moved from here to here. That gets me, but after time you get it. But otherwise, ergonomically, they are very, very similar. One thing that I actually think is an advantage with the Z, I don't know if you can see, but this viewfinder here is a whole finger out from the back of the camera, whereas this one is right up against. So for me, who's a left eye shooter, left eye, and I bang my nose against stuff because, you know, I have such an epic nose, the further this can come out, the better. And obviously this is not so far. Ergonomically, this is actually an improvement. Thank you very much, Nikon. Okay, next, let's talk about the screen. So the screens, they're roughly the same size and they tilt. They've got the same sort of tilt options, similar tilt action. Now, I think if there's one thing I would say about the Nikons versus, say, the Canons, is I wouldn't mind a screen that flipped out, you know? Flip! Not sure why they don't do it. Maybe it's because you need to take up a bit of space with a more complicated hinge. Sure, I get it. I would actually pay an extra, I don't know, $300 for a flip screen just because it has its use for my use case, which is I do video and I do vlogging. But Nikon have probably decided it's only 1% of their customers that need it. So they've just gone, well, that's the way it is. Ergonomically, that's a fail for both cameras. Neither of them have a flip around facing the front screen. That's just the way it is. As for the screen's actual usability, the graphical user interface and so on is almost identical between the two. So if you know one, you know the other, and that's great. Makes it super easy and super simple. There is a little bit more functionality though when you're shooting with the Z's screen. Yep, so they both do touch to focus, which is useful. Obviously with the Z, the idea of live view, well, that's always on. So it's not something new. Whereas with a DSLR, you kind of have to turn live view on. And it's sort of an ergonomic thing that you have to go into this sort of other area, other section, other way of using the camera to get those touch to focus sort of things. Whereas with a mirrorless, you're either shooting like this or you're shooting like this and you just touch to focus and it's just happening, it's more organic. I would say overall that experience of using the screen is easier and more fluid on the more modern mirrorless camera. So that's the screen. Otherwise, it's similar. It's a very similar experience. Guys, are you coming back? We've got to keep shooting. Yeah. The D850, the Z7 and I were just having a little coffee break and they're not coming back just yet. Anyway, leads me to, well, those guys have, when I say coffee, I actually mean they're having a few beers, which leads me to stabilization. The Z7 is going to come back from those beers much more healthy than the D850. And why is that? Because the Z7 has IBIS. It has in-body image stabilization, and the D850 does not. Now, what does this allow for? It allows for two things: an improvement in stills capacity and an improvement in video gathering capacity. So in regards to stills, let's say you use your 85mm 1.4 lens on the D850 and you're not happier to go anything below 1/100th of a second. The IBIS gives you 5 stops of stabilization. So you can go from 100 to a 50th, 50th to a 25th, 25th to a 12th, and a 12th to a 6th, and all the way down to 1/3 of a second. Now, that's what you can do. I certainly shoot maybe something like a 15th of a second with an 85mm lens, and I'm comfortable because the IBIS is that good. And I have pushed these things even further than that. So this is what you can do. You just would not dream of going to 1/15th or 1/6th of a second with your 85mm lens. You wouldn't dream of it. But with IBIS, you can contemplate it and you can get away with it as long as you've got good technique for stabilization. Whether it's elbows on your chest or finding yourself a wall, all these things help. Wherever you are, you might decide to shoot your 85mm at 1/200th of a second and you can go 5 stops down from there. This is very helpful and it makes your F lenses far more useful than they were before. And of course with video, well, with video the D850 has no stabilization. It does have digital stabilization, which helps, but you do get the jello effect. And the jello effect is, yeah, pretty annoying, doesn't look that great. Stabilization is better. So it makes the camera more useful at stills, more useful at video. When it comes to stabilization, hey guys, are you coming back? No more beer, I mean coffee. Anyway, when it comes to stabilization, the Z7 wins without a doubt. The D850's got nothing, and it will be dependent upon your lenses. So you might have a 72-200 VR, but like me, you might have an 85 1.4, not stabilized. A tilt shift lens, my 85, my 24 tilt shifts, not stabilized. My 24 1.4, not stabilized. My 50mm 1.4, not stabilized. My original 24 to 72.8, not stabilized. All those lenses, not stabilized. On the Z7 they are, so they suddenly become more useful than they've ever been. So, hey Z7, you win. Z7 wins. Tick, bang, boom. Z7 wins for stabilization. Sorry, D850. They'll be back. Well, I'll get them. We've got more to do. I'll get them back. Come on. Hey, guys, seriously. Hello? Let's next talk about lenses. Now, lenses might be, besides card slots, one of the most contentious subjects. I am a glass half full person. That means I'm positive about life in the universe. It's worked for me well to date. It's a good thing. And what I'm basically saying is this: the Z system's a new system. If you're like me and you're a pro or an enthusiast, you've got some F gear, and now you're going to transition into the Z space. That's what you're going to do. You're going to turn up at the store, spend $4,500 on a camera, and then buy every lens they have, except maybe the Noct, and spend another $10,000. Are you on the first day going to spend $15,000? I doubt it. I think most people are going to buy a camera, maybe get the kit lens, maybe get one other lens. From then on, they will get a lens every month or two at best. So from my perspective, you can get into the Z space. You've already got the basic lenses ready to go. And they are, as we've seen, you can watch this video here about the 50mm You can watch this video here about the 35mm, and you can watch this video here about the 24-70 f4. They are all great lenses. They're ready to go. You can buy them now and they are inexpensive. So from a lens roadmap perspective, I think we're all just about got the basics. The 70-200 is going to be here any second. It's supposed to be here this year, and really that's enough to get most photographers rolling. And of course, if you are, because this is a D850 to Z7 comparison, you are most likely to be a Nikon user, which means you've already got some Nikon glass. And if you've got Nikon glass, I cannot implore enough that the F to Z adapter works brilliantly on the Z cameras. All the F glass works brilliantly, and I actually think it works better because you're getting in-body stabilization, and I also think they're using some of the smarts in the camera to flatten out vignetting and flatten out chromatic aberration and just fix a few issues with these lenses that they know about because they made them, they designed them, they hear about it, and I think the Z7 has more smarts in it to fix them. So your F-glass, which you own today, will actually, in my opinion, work better for a number of reasons on the Z than it does on your F-mount camera. So note, not only does the Z have the amazing Z lenses, which are very well priced, bang for buck, but you have all your F lenses as well. I think the Z wins because lenses like the 50mm 1.8, this is not like the 50mm 1.8 of F. And this is a very quick aside, but I've had a lot of conversations with people about, oh, 1.8 lenses, who wants a 1.8? They used to be considered rubbish. We are living in a new world where a mirror box this big has been removed from a camera. It's completely changed lens design, and 1.8 lenses have become 1.4 lenses. And this is why on Nikon's roadmap, we don't see 1.4s, we just see 1.2s coming at some point. These lenses will blow your mind. The 50mm especially blew my mind when I first saw the files. It was like, what? That's crazy. Yeah, so from a lens perspective, you are a kid in a candy store with the Z, honestly. You've got all the best things of the old world and all the best things of the new world. And if, for example, check out this video here where you can see me putting my f4 200-400 F lens on this tiny little camera. Looks silly, but it works like a dream. Even the bigger elephant in the room than the lens conversation is dual card slots. Now, I'd like you to watch this video here where I talk about some solutions if you really need two card slots. Now, of course, the D850 has SD and XQD. It does kind of have the very best of both worlds. You've got the crazy, robust XQD and SD, the ubiquitous. If you go to a milk bar in Mongolia, you can probably get an SD card. I mean, they are everywhere. You can buy them from service stations, you can buy them from supermarkets. XQD, well, let's be honest, you can hardly buy them anywhere. So this is great from that perspective, being an all-rounder. Totally true. And I don't think CF and XQD will ever live in that space where you'll be able to buy them anywhere. I just think it'll never, ever, ever happen. Well, no. I don't think that's going to happen in the next 10 years. It might happen after that. So 2 card slots, it's got a universal card that you can buy anywhere. That's a complete win. Totally true. Plus you get, we believe that this is going to be upgraded to CF Express with a firmware update as well. So you're getting all the best of both worlds. From a universal perspective, this doesn't have SD. Clearly, you can't buy an SD card anywhere, and that's just the way it is, so we have to accept that. But once you've accepted that and you've bought a couple of XQD or CF Express cards, you're in business, great. Once you have accepted XQD or CF Express, then you realize all the advantages of that format. It is significantly faster. It can squeeze so much more into the space because the space is larger. So ultimately, we're already seeing 1 terabyte cards. It will go beyond that if anyone ever wants to buy them. It's a format that will allow raw video to go directly onto that format, which is insane. And we may well see that in, say, the Nikon D6 or the Nikon Z8 or 9, whatever it's called. It is the format of the future. It is different. It is a change, and we just need to accept it. And of course, that's the format. If you're worried about having 1 or 2 of those, well, that video I was talking about here, that gives you some solutions for having a backup of the 1 slot that's in here. I think this one wins from the slots perspective because it has slots, 2 of them, and one of them's SD, which is everywhere. But that being said, I'm not worried about either of those 2 points, that it has 2. I'm not worried about that. and I'm not worried that it doesn't have SD, because there's some things in life when you go on a holiday that you need to take. Your passport, that's one of them, and a couple of XQD cards, that's another one. It just has to be a thing if this is who you are. So I'm not worried about that stuff. Let's talk about battery life. Let's just start at the start. The Z7 is worse, absolutely true. Should we leave it at that? Okay, all right, we won't leave it at that. In both cases now, there is a battery grip attachable. And with my D850, obviously the D850 has been made as a fully pro camera that can pretty much handle anything you can throw at it. Further to that story, people like Canon, Nikon, Sony, they make this, which is simply a battery extender, and it does give you a vertical grip, and it does give you the buttons that go with it. Now, this takes Nikon's craziest, biggest battery, which in my D4, wait for it, gives me 5,000 images. So when you pop this guy on the bottom of a D850, the D850 already shoots something around 2,000 to 2,500 images from one reasonably small battery, right? 2,500. Then you add that other one on the bottom, you are genuinely getting 6,000 or 7,000 images from that one kit. This guy, this is mirrorless, and mirrorless is a whole new world where you've got TV screens. In here, there's a TV screen, and in here, this is a TV screen. They're on all the time. And because they're on all the time, they use a lot of power. So this little guy here will not get anywhere near that. And it's a different paradigm, and you've just got to accept it. That's just the way it is. So, you know, this is kind of all electronic. It's a bit like an electric car. Right now, electric cars, they can't go as fast as a combustion engine car, right? You've got to fuel up more often. That's the disadvantage. Well, you choose to drive electric, that's what you get. You choose to go mirrorless, you don't get the same battery life as a D850. You can get a battery extender that goes on the bottom. I don't have it. It's just a battery extender and a grip. Doesn't add any buttons. That's fine, I don't mind either way. I won't be getting that. I can still get almost a day's shooting out of this. And of course, one difference is I can USB-C plug a battery into this external battery, and I can charge as I'm going. I can't charge whilst I'm shooting, but in the downtime or over lunch, I can charge. I can't do that with this camera. I can't charge on the fly just from a little battery via USB. Plus, I don't have much of a problem carrying around one or two of these. They are the size of a box of matches. They are tiny. So it's no big deal, like I said. So almost a day from this, if I take 2 or 3 with me, I feel 100% confident I will get through the day. Logic suggests, again, the Nikon D850 clearly wins for battery life. It goes essentially forever, as long as you would ever want. I sometimes, if I've just got a 2 or 3 day trip away shooting, I don't even take battery chargers with me because I know these will go the distance. So amazing, it wins. But this is a whole new world, and we've got to accept some compromises somewhere, and battery life is part of it. So yes, it's not as good, but it doesn't matter. And of course, as life goes on, batteries improve 10% each year. That's what they tell us. And as they use smaller and smaller processors, the 5 nanometer process, the 3 nanometer process, as those chips keep getting reduced and reduced, they use less power. Obviously the screens won't change, but you know, that technology keeps being absolutely championed by the mobile phone developers, where they keep creating new displays, better batteries, and more efficient chips. So this stuff is only going to get better. I would say within 3 to 5 years, this will be as good as that. With all manufacturers. But right now, yes, better battery life. But let's talk about frames per second. With some caveats, this one can be pushed up to 9 frames a second, but your focus might start to give way. So it depends if the subject is moving. If you're photographing a static model and the focus doesn't need to change, then you'll get good 9 frames per second. This thing shoots at 7 frames per second as is. And then if you add this on, which gives it extra power to throw that mirror up and down at a great speed, you'll get 9. But then add this, they're both 9, and this will probably give you better focus at that 9 frames a second. So I would say frames per second, this one actually wins from my perspective, because it's about it being usable. Okay, let's talk about image quality. I know I touched on that at the start. What's lovely about shooting these two cameras is they're the same megapixels. So you're literally looking at the files identical in size. I would think they're using very similar technologies, but the focusing now exists on this sensor. And when you push these files above, say, beyond, say, 4 stops, you start to see banding in the files, and that's because of the on-chip focusing. So even so that's there, and it is a real thing, the banding on the files, if you push them, say, beyond about 4 stops. In real world usage, I've probably photographed more than 10,000 frames on this camera. I would say it's only been a problem once or twice that I've actually gone, oh, I can't quite push the file as far as I want to. You just drop it back a smidge, and it's only in the dark areas. You can't see it anywhere else. It's only in the darkest areas of the file. So some images, it doesn't even matter. It just doesn't read. It just doesn't happen. The sensors are pretty similar. I do think this gives you slightly better files. That might be more to do with the amazing optics and the fact that the lenses here handle chromatic aberration, they handle ghosting, they just do things better. So is it because the quality of the files is better, or is it because the optics are better? It's hard to say. It's hard to say at the end of the day, because this is a completely different system. So for me, there's no question I'm really enjoying the quality of the files that are coming out with, say, this lens here, this 50mm lens. I'm loving it. I think it's beautiful. I own a 60 megapixel Hasselblad. Across the board, this is a more enjoyable experience. And the files are so similar. They're similar, they're not the same, but they're similar, that, you know, I will walk out the door with this rather than the massive Hasselblad. So for files, because this is using the old F-glass, because I don't think there's just the same control over aberration and ghosting, and these are clearly optically superior. Across the board, because of the sensor, because of the glass, because of the electronics, these are giving you the better images, even so they are the same megapixels. The Z7 wins. Video, well, you know, this can be short. I could go into a deep explanation. I won't, because this is a proper hybrid shooter. The fact that you can look through an EVF and shoot, that is gold to me. This is not, you've got live view, it's clunky, the way you hold the camera is clunky, the ergonomics are much harder, and so that's point one, just the ergonomics of the video is much harder on a D850, the way you look at it, using the EVF and so on. And the focus on the Z7 in video is far better than the focus on the D850. The D850 has face detect. It doesn't work. The face detect on the Z absolutely works. Plus, we can get much higher quality files out of this. We can get 10-bit files right now, and we're going to be able to get RAW files any minute now. Come on, Nikon, hurry up, we're all waiting. We can get RAW files really soon. No question for video. Yo-ho, this is the winner. Boom. Weather sealing. Whether or not they're sealed, well, from what I understand, the Z7 has best-in-class weather sealing when it comes to mirrorless cameras. So it's right up there. It can handle heavy rain. It's great. I've used it in the rain. I use it with confidence. And I've always used my Nikons the same way. So the D850, I don't even think about rain when it's raining. And it would only be tropical level rain, where it's like you're getting a bucket of water on you every 10 seconds, literally that much water. That is the only time I'd probably go, okay, maybe it's time to stop because I'm getting too wet. So from a weather sealing perspective, I have no reason to see much difference between them. It's possible and quite likely that this is better. Right now, I'm treating them the same. So weather sealing, thumbs up for both of them.
And 2 final points before I let you go. Firstly, the Z7 uses USB-C, and that is fantastic. Unlike the D850 that uses that old 2-pronged USB that's not as common as most and is just harder to use. The Z7 is lighter than the D850, and for most people, they prefer to have less rather than more. So that is another win for the Z7. And I'm just showing here how easy it is to switch between stills and video. And you can see I go from FX to DX mode at the flick of a switch because you have separate settings for both. It is simply the easiest on the Z7.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you're a Nikon user, you've maybe got your D800 or your D810 or your D500 and you're wondering what to do next, should you pick up a very well priced D850 or should you jump into the future and grab yourself something Z? It's a difficult question. For me, this is just progress. This is just evolution. It's just a transition from the F to the Z. It's what's going to happen. F, I'm confident, will not be developed anymore, and that might stop in the next 3 to 5 years. There's no other way Nikon can survive. They have to do it, and they're giving us a very easy and wonderful upgrade path where everything you own glass-wise will work forever on this little guy. So you've got nothing to worry about. It's a great transition. If I owned a D750 or a D500 and I wanted to keep it, I could keep it. I would definitely go the Z. If I only have one camera at a time, then it comes down to your use case. Are you shooting wildlife, sports, and you don't need video? 100% get this camera. If you're a hybrid shooter and you want video is a big part of it, and you want a competent video machine, high speed sports, wildlife in lower light situations is just not an option. You don't do it. I would 100% get this. All other shooting scenarios, parties, commercial photography, weddings, anything you can think of, both of these cameras are commensurate. And of course, we've just been through their pros and cons. I'm a guy who likes to move towards the future. I'm a guy who likes to understand what's the future bringing, what's happening in this space. So I will slowly transition with a little investment here and a little investment there. What do you think? The most important thing for me is, what are you doing and what do you think? This is my use case. This is what works for me. But what are you doing? Would you stay with the F? Or do you want to start to dabble with the Z? And would you go a Z6 or a Z7? This is a comparison with a Z7, of course. The Z6 is very much the same, except it's 24 megapixels instead of 45 and a bit. And it has slightly better focus, slightly faster focus, and they say slightly sharper video. I haven't tried it. But the rest of it is much the same between the Z6 and the Z7. The bodies are identical. So which are you going to do? I would love to hear what Nikon users of the world are going to do. And I would love to hear, maybe you're not a Nikon user, maybe you've been using Micro Four Thirds and you're thinking, where do I go next? What am I going to do? Is the old warhorse Nikon still got what it takes? Or am I maybe going to jump over to Sony or Canon? Who knows? I'd love to hear all of that from you. All right. As always, thank you so much for watching. It has been so lovely to see you. If you like what you see, please subscribe. Please share, it makes us all smarter. Please like, and you can see over 150 episodes right now. Wouldn't that be great? You can see more of me, I can see more of you, we can hang out together. Anyway, I'm going, see ya.